and I'm back with the latter half of my unofficial Big Boss ranking. So, funnily enough, the very first mission in this video was actually the mission that essentially began this entire challenge, Code Talker being a close second. I'm not entirely sure why I chose White Mamba to begin exploring and developing this challenge, but that's just what happened. Through my trials of White Mamba, I was able to rule out my initial attempts at 300% vision and hearing, leading me to reduce it down to 200. I was also kicking around the idea of doing all the extreme missions with this rule set, but that clearly wasn't the way I wanted to go either. There just wasn't enough of these missions in the catalog, and a few of them were just out of the question entirely. Without the many repeated trials of White Mamba, this challenge may not have even existed, so let's pay homage to this very special mission and get right into the video. Like I just said, White Mamba was the very first mission I completed for this challenge, back when I thought 300% vision would be a good idea. I was trying every possible scenario with White Mamba and found that it was simply impossible to do at that range. At 300% vision, there was a 100% chance of me either being seen or being heard while climbing up the derelict ship. This would always lead to an instant alert and subsequent failure of the mission. After throwing everything I had at this mission, failing over and over again, I came to the conclusion that maybe 300% was just too much. There was also people online who had reached the same conclusion, leading me to reconsider my rules and turn it down. Still, at 200%, this mission is extremely sensitive, mostly due to the many guards patrolling the hills being in range of spotting me as I climbed up the ship. Think of their vision cone being like that one sniper from Metal Gear Solid 2 that watches over the EF connecting bridge. Too niche? Whatever. As you can see, I don't take the normal approach to this mission by going through the village, as, like I said, there are a bunch of kids patrolling around every corner, and this alternate path was left totally unguarded. I'm able to get most of the way around the village before popping down off the embankment I'm standing on, now at more risk of being spotted. Although this is true, I'm able to maintain an upright stance as I push further around this side of the camp. Once I came up to the road though, I sink into a crouched position and maintain my course. Since I don't go fully prone, I do make one of the kids suspicious as he sees me through an open doorway. Quickly tagging him and his partner, I get back on track, finding cover quickly amidst a nearby community of buildings. Continuing toward the boat now, I tag who I can, check my enemy's positions, and make it to the ship with zero complications. That was the easy part. The hardest part of this whole mission was trying to climb up the side of the ship without being spotted by the multiple kids who have yet to develop astigmatism. Getting up the ladder is no problem since the ship gives me plenty of cover. This ice chest though was always the one that got me into trouble, as evident from the immediate suspicion from the kid who's like 200 meters away. I had to pull back and wait out his lazy ass to come check what he saw, taking all the time in the fucking world to do so. After about 2 minutes they were back on patrol and I was eager to try again. This time I made it all the way to the freezer and climbed on top of it before being heard by the closest kid. Hoping for the best, I quickly rose to the next floor and then made my way up to yet another floor, putting me right above the White Mamba's quarters. After making it up here, I dropped to a prone position and crawled to a good area to lure him to, knocked my arm, and RKO'd him from the upper deck. As a direct result of this, all the kids stood down, allowing me to grab White Mamba and get out via the already called in P-Quad.
Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss.
Oh boy. Giving a mission a time limit while simultaneously making it extremely difficult is a recipe for disaster. Judging by the name, I think this mission involves rescuing a couple of intel agents. I'm not sure. Now, this isn't one of those missions where it's only necessary to rescue one of them, like in Lingua Franca. No, this time I gotta save both. The first target, who's pretty much mandatory to grab first, was where I was headed off to. He's in the swamp just outside Mgsv camp and already has enemies out here closing in on his location. Using D-Horse for transport and a little bit of cover, I swung wide around the left side of this swampy area, passing by two of the guys who were associated with the search party. I parked in a spot that I thought was safe, but as soon as I dismounted, two guards took notice of me. I detoured away from the agent to lose my tail before proceeding to cut him free and extract him to a safe location by following the creek back out the direction I'd came from. I caught the attention of one stray guard on my way out, but by continuing forward and not panicking, I managed to make it out safely. I dropped this first agent off in one of the buildings that were nearby, then hopped on D-Horse to secure the second one. This guy was deep in the heart of Mgsv. Posting up just on the outskirts of camp, I was mere meters away from where target number 2 was being held. The only downside here was that there was plenty of posted enemies I'd need to be careful of. The upside was that many of them weren't looking in my direction or were on a rotation, so I was able to drop prone and crawl right up to the prisoner's hole. Pause. I'd planned on sitting here until the posted guard went on his rotation, but as soon as I got there, he began his routine. I continued around, rolling down the hill a little before popping up to a crouch and releasing the imprisoned agent. With him now on my back and incapable of being Fultoned, I now needed to exit the camp undetected. Upon coming out the top of the hole, one of the guards saw me and began a search in my direction. I really wanted to know which of the guards it was, so I had an idea of where I should go to avoid him, but I wasn't willing to risk anything, so I just marched on forward, holding on to Hope. Well, Hope is a tough motherfucker, cause I made it out, loaded up on a D-horse, called in Pequod where I'd left the other guy, and once he'd come, we all loaded up inside and got out without a trace.
Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
To be honest, I thought this mission was gonna be an easy dub. I was sorely mistaken. Voices tasks me with finding Shibani and securing him safely. However, it's not as easy as it sounds. Of course, there's plenty of guards placed throughout the route of his last known location. The bridge would be a direct path to the target facility, but too bad for me, it's been destroyed. Luckily, there's another path, but it's stuffed with those aforementioned guards. After taking the path off the side of the bridge and marking all visible enemies, I rushed down the left side of the creek, trying to maintain a barrier between myself and the other guards. Coming up to this ramshackle building, I leap into a prone position and keep moving forward. As I came up to the side of this broken brick wall, I hid behind a barrel to wait out the incoming enemy. Once he was stationary at his post, I sat a little while longer to look for my next opportunity. At about 1 minute and 45 seconds, I had a very brief window where I was able to crawl between all 3 guards positioned here while their backs were turned. I was safe and out of sight as soon as I was behind this stack of lumber. Again, I was forced to wait for a specific guard rotation, and once he was on the move, so was I. Dropping to a prone position, I began crawling forward, hugging the left side as much as I possibly could. The guard eventually got suspicious of me, but I would be long gone before he would even spot me. There's one last guard I had to get by, and fortunately my path has a pre-built guard lure baked right into it. This lure gives me the time I need to position further up the hill, and as soon as the guard is stationed back at his original post, I'm now able to crawl right behind him with no issues. I think there's more guys positioned somewhere up ahead, but instead of going around to find out, I hopped up on a rock and freely made my way to the tunnel, now free of any chance of being seen. Passing through the tunnel, I came up to a building housing quite a gruesome scene. I found Shibani, but it's unfortunately too late. We were interrupted by Skullface and his man on fire, prompting me to leave. Sorry to say, I couldn't save Shibani, but at least I got his necklace. Now it was me versus the man on fire without any weapons. Great. I was able to flee from the MOF, but he wasn't letting Pequod land anywhere as long as he was still standing. I ran around some more looking for something, anything that could help me, and there it was. In all its glory, a Jeep, ripe for the picking. I now wondered if this thing could take out water towers. Slamming it into reverse, I sped to the nearest tower, proving that it was indeed possible. Too bad I just wasted that one. Knowing what I know now, I called in Pequod a second time and went about trying to ram the last available water tower until I jumped the fucking Jeep into the goddamn pool. Great. As I struggled to get out of this stupid place, Pequod got shot down again, and I crashed into the last remaining water tower hoping I'd make it in time. I did not. In a panic and holding out to all my hope, I called in Pequod while the MOF was still down, and after having the thought far too late, I went about trying to Fulton him. I then remembered that I think you gotta shoot Psycho in order to do this. Whatever. Pequod was on his way to the LZ, and in a last-ditch effort, I sprinted to him, hopped aboard, and got out by the skin of my teeth.
Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss.
Holy shit, was Close Contact the perfect name for this mission. I struggled heavy on this one. It seems like a fairly straightforward task, right? I mean, all I had to do was rescue 2 prisoners being held at a small outpost. Well, it's not till we're boots on the ground that we learn a little more about this outpost. It's actually quite well staffed, and not only that, but there are 2 vehicles full of enemies en route. As per usual, D-Horse helps us get to the camp quickly, but from here, it's all up to me. I learned through my attempts that there was a very specific line that, when I crossed it, triggered the aforementioned jeeps to begin their journey. Now, I don't want that to happen quite yet, so I held back to begin tagging all the enemies I could see. I'm also waiting for the male prisoner to begin attempting his escape from the tent and hit a very specific point. Once he hit this juncture, I could then begin my rush inward and meet up with him safely. However, on my way over there, as I'm rushing a little bit, I do catch the eye of one of the nearby guards, but dolphin diving further away allows me to avoid any ramifications. As I'm coming up on him, the enemy sees him and orders him to freeze. This causes me to panic and rush the last few feet by dolphin diving a few times, switching their attention to me. I'm just out of reach of them truly seeing me, so I'm able to pop up to a crouch and secure a Fulton to my first target. Now I had to lose my tail. I dove away from the camp, using their shifted focus to my advantage, and got away safely and tucked behind a rock. Seeing that they're still preoccupied and bewildered at what they just saw, I continued diving closer and closer to their tent. I was able to make it all the way to just outside their tent and paused here to find an opportunity to secure target number 2. It looked like they were all going to investigate the site of the disappearing prisoner, but one hung back to have a conversation with a fellow officer. After their dialogue, he began heading into the tent, hopefully not pushing all the way through and out to where I'm positioned. Then, just as he's turning around, another guard shows up. But thankfully, he's just here to join the other guy in his exit. On all accounts, it looks as if they're headed away from the tent, so I saw this opportunity and took it. As cautious as I could, I got in and secured the prisoner. I think I made just enough noise to spook a nearby guard, but after only vaguely seeing me, he pauses to call into command, giving me all the extra time I need to pull even further away from the camp. As soon as I was absolutely clear, I Fultoned prisoner number 2, took 2 steps forward, and exited the hot zone, all in one fell swoop.
Exfiltrate. Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
Keeping it short and sweet, I have 2 targets I need to locate and secure for this one. One of them is the leader of this camp of child soldiers, and the other is his older brother. He's being held as a prisoner near the middle of the camp. Since one of the 2 targets will certainly be armed, I need to bring along the water gun in order to disarm him. The plan was to first secure the prisoner, then work on bringing home the armed leader. D-Horse helps me, again, approach the camp quickly, dropping me off at the first building we came up to. Continuing and on foot and keeping a low profile, I managed to catch a glimpse of target number 2 as he moved across the road and into a new position. I paused at the corner of this yellow building to lure out the 2 guards posted locally. You can't see them at the moment, but they're there. Trust. There's one kid posted on the other side of the building watching over the prisoner, and another stationed inside. Both kids were lured by the knock, allowing me the opportunity to cut the target free and throw him on my back. Now, around the time I was doing all this, there were 2 groups of enemies coming in from 2 separate directions, leaving me really only one option to leave from: crossing the road. Doing this puts me at risk of being seen by the guard that accompanied target number 2, but by doing all this fast enough, I'm able to barely squeeze by with only his suspicion working against me. I reached the buildings on the other side of the road, providing me with some much needed cover, and after passing the post of target number 2, I set target number 1 down to take advantage of the kid's stalled movement. From this point, I was able to sneak around to the tents, lure the guard to a more secluded spot, loop around the tent to get behind him, and get him to surrender to a man wielding a water gun. After getting him on the ground, I sent him off with some balloons, then went back to secure target number 1. Amidst me passing back over the road, the recently distracted kid was on his way back to his post and became suspicious of me once again. It's not a problem though, since once I gotten back to target number 1, there's plenty of cover from the buildings that I can easily load up Big Brother and take him off into a sprint to meet back up with Pequod and get the hell back to Mother Base.
That's it. You made it out of the hot zone. Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
Root Cause is a pretty simple mission once you've played through it a few times and understand how to abuse the enemy's suspicions. The idea here is to hop on a D-Horse and make my way towards the road that's to the left of where I spawn. Once I'd made it to the road, I began to follow it up until I'd hit about the 5th power pole, or right before the road turns right. Either of these markers could be used to identify where I need to slip to the right a D-Horse and plunge off the side of this cliff. Taking this action led me to catch all 3 of the nearby guards' attention. The purpose of this was to stall or lure these 3 guards in my direction, because if I let them go about their normal route, they'd have a possibility of catching my target before he could escape in the truck. I lost the attention of the 3 guards almost immediately and continued around the outskirts of the camp, resting atop a nearby hill. I waited as I watched the prisoner get loose and take control of the vehicle. Once he'd done so, I'd sat upright in the saddle once more to begin booking it in his direction. You see, D-Horse comes from a long line of prestigious racehorses, so outrunning this truck was really no problem for him. Stopping the truck by riding in front of it, I hopped down and secured a couple of balloons to the front of it. Since he's not stable enough for a Fulton extraction, the prisoner fell out of the truck before it was shot into the sky. So instead, I loaded the dude up on D-Horse, called in Pequod for extraction, met him at the landing zone, and got out. Just like that.
Alright, get in. Time to go. Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss.
Good old Code Talker. This mission, similar to Where the Bees Sleep, has a painful cost each time I had to restart. There are 3 major parts to Code Talker: the skulls, the infiltration, and the exfiltration. Let's start with the skulls. I've played through this mission so many goddamn times that I have absolutely zero issues getting by these girls unnoticed. After the cutscene, I could essentially just sprint my way down the river and make it to the first part of my mountain climbing adventure. This path is totally clear of any skulls unless you get the occasional alternate spawns. Once I get past the climbable rock face, I do want to be a bit more cautious here since there is a slight chance for one of them being made aware of me if I stood up too high, much like this one does here. This mostly just causes whichever one it was to move their position and try and get a better look at me, but in this case, I was still safe, so I continued on, inching closer to the edge of the mist. Once I climbed up and over this big rock, I pretty much had a clear shot to the edge, and so I hopped the river, went around and up a level, and shot straight over the bridge and out of the mist. The skulls, done. Riding the high of my momentum, I don't slow down. Over the second bridge, I hook a hard left and go up an alternate path that has much more cover than the rest. As I got up and over the hill revealing the mansion, I stopped to hide behind a rock to wait out the spotlight's rotation. Once he was aimed the other way, I was able to sprint to the first ledge, jog to and up the second, then dolphin dive my way up the hill, seeking to get away from the mansion. Once I was a comfortable enough distance away, I got up to sprint across the road and over to the river. Following the river down 2 small waterfalls, I stopped right before the third to climb a hill and tag these 2 guards, as well as try to make them suspicious of me. Actually, I really wanted both of their attention, but I only got the one. As I waited for him to check out the area and make his way back to his post, I noticed that the other guard has left his post to patrol inside the mansion. I had never encountered this before, but I'd also never been this early to this checkpoint, so I chalked it up to that. Anyway, since this guard was now left to secure this door alone, I, once again, got his attention. Now, if you don't know this, here's a little secret. When guards find you suspicious for the first time, they'll usually check it out with no reports to command, but if you trigger their suspicions multiple times, they'll usually make a call into command before commencing their search. This can buy you some much needed time if you need it. I didn't really need it in this case, but it didn't hurt and it allowed me time to get to a good position before he even left his post. With his buddy still occupied in the mansion and him off on a goose chase, I was now free to enter the mansion, head down to the basement, and make contact with Code Talker. Infiltration done. All that's left is the exfil. Now that I have Code Talker and I didn't take out the skull snipers, all the guards are now zombies and are positioned in such a way that I can't just walk around them and out the door. Now typically this is where I would try and lure one all the way down to the stream type area in the basement, loop around them, and try to head out with one less guard to worry about. Most of these attempts ended in failure, so I figured I would just wait it out and observe this time. After about 40 seconds of waiting around, all the guards surrounding the door had their backs turned, and I just booked it. Making out the door, I almost immediately run into not 1, not 2, but 3 guards just outside this door. That shit made my heart skip a beat. Okay, so the first one wasn't even that close, but I had no clue what was on the other side of that door, so it was terrifying in the moment. Now, getting Code Talker out with the skull snipers in play is literally the easiest shit ever. Basically, I went down the same way I came in. Although there is a ledge here, it's short enough to toss Code Talker up there and keep on trucking. Code Talker is old as hell, but his body can handle much, much more. After gathering Code Talker back up, I crossed the bridge and requested a pickup from Pequod. Now all that was left to do is run. don't sprint along the right side of this cliff and they'll be none the wiser. Sure, I had a couple of zombies take interest in me, but there's virtually nothing in this path to put me at risk of failing this mission. Breaking out of the jungle, Pequod was just touching down. Perfect. Toss the old man in there and let's get the fuck out of here. Exfil complete.
Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
To Know Too Much is yet another gimme mission. This one is as straightforward as it gets. I've received some intel about a man who, well, knows too much. There's currently a group of walker gears out in the desert scouring the lands for him, and it's my job to find him before they do. There's really not a whole lot to say about this one. D-Horse was the real MVP of this mission. He helped me get around an enemy outpost that was standing between me and the open desert, then he afforded me his speed, once again, to get by the various walker gears and make it to the target extremely early. Once I'd made contact with the target, I scooped him up on my back and ran like hell to get away from the incoming walkers. I eventually felt safe enough to reunite with D-Horse and rode him to the designated LZ, avoiding any further resistance. Enough said.
Exfiltrate the hot zone, boss. Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
Is this mission supposed to rely a little bit on RNG? Yes. Was I going to restart the mission each time the film canister wasn't in the location I wanted? Also yes. After an initial few attempts at penetrating Spugmay Keep from every possible avenue, I'd finally settled on one that I'd liked. This particular avenue hinged solely on the film canister being located in this particular spot. I chose to spawn in what I think is the less popular drop point for this mission, but this was by design. Coming from this direction would give me easy access to a couple guard lures I could use to my advantage. By riding in on D-Horse and using him as cover, I can grab the attention of one of the guards posted on the outskirts of the keep. Then I could stop here, climb a couple rocks, and begin sprinting as loudly as possible. This would, of course, make a bunch of noise and lure even more guards in this direction. Hugging the wall, I continued left, moving away from the busy guards. Going this direction will bring me around and up to where the canister was being stored. There was one guard up here, but by getting there in a timely manner, I'm able to walk forward and parallel with him while he's still on his rotation. Closing in on the canister now, I leapt the last few feet, secured the canister, then dove back out. Heading out now the opposite way I came in, keeping low to the ground since I don't know where everyone is right now, and I don't want to blow this whole operation right at the finish line. I might have already learned my lesson once before. After reaching a point that I was sure I would no longer be seen, I can begin sprinting in the direction of my intended LZ. I do still need to maintain plenty of caution as there is a truck that's on its way to Spugmay Keep, and I don't want it to spot me, because it can, and it will. After the truck passes by, I'm then free to call in Pequod and sprint to the location to get picked up. Easy peasy.
Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
Unfortunately, this somewhat complicated mission is reduced to basically child's play with either of the two mandatory equipment handicaps. The war economy can only be completed by bringing in either a wormhole Fulton or the water gun. I went with the wormhole Fulton. Using D-Horse for relocation, I rode around the back walls of Nova Braga Airport until I reached this corner right here before the guard tower. By making as much noise as possible, I can manipulate the guy in the walker gear into checking out the suspicious noises, allowing me time to pick the lock, enter the airport, cross into the hangar, and enter the bed of the truck. Here is where I'll lay for the next 7 minutes while I wait for the CFA agent and the arms dealer to mosey on over to the hangar at the slowest possible pace. After another minute or so of talking, they finally make their way into the vehicle. Now, once the engine is roaring and I have a bit of noise to cover my movements, I make my way over off the side of the truck. This catches the attention of the arms dealer who hadn't yet gotten into the truck. The noise from the engine still wasn't enough to negate his 200% hearing. Lucky for me, he's not that interested in pursuing any searches and just goes about his business entering the vehicle. As soon as he was in, I sent both of them in their truck into the nether. And boom, mission complete. Well, kind of. I still gotta get out of here. There's now just a walker gear and an attack helicopter in my way, but fortunately, like many of the guards in this game, they've got rotations. Some might see these as simply pre-programmed pawns stuck in an endless hell of walking in circles, but I see them as opportunities. Once the chopper had passed by overhead, I waited until the walker gear was headed into the position I knew he would hold for at least a few seconds. It was enough time to get back out the gate and sprinting for freedom. However, the chopper had other plans. Before I could make a completely clean break, I had to lay in wait for a few seconds in the only cover I had at the time, a shadow. Thankfully, it was enough to conceal me from the enemy chopper, and after it was gone, I was able to get up and finally make that clean break to freedom.
Alright, you're out of the hot zone. No enemy forces in pursuit. Mission complete. Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss.
With probably a ton of luck, I was actually able to complete hunting down with only one attempt. It's a pretty simple mission, but instead of speeding through it to the finish, this one was much of the opposite. Now, I spent an entire 10 minutes on this job just sitting and observing, but a wise man once said, good things come to those who wait. My job was to track down and eliminate a human trafficker who's on the move somewhere between Mgsv Camp and the abandoned village. Since I'd played through these missions somewhat recently, I had a rough idea where I would find my man, and by using the call for pickup option with Pequod, I'm able to see my available pickup locations. Using this information and knowing that his troop would pass through one of my LZs, I'm able to position on a hill near the closest one and wait. About 15 seconds past the second minute of this mission, I'm able to spot the first few men in the pack. The area they're covering right now is far too open, so this is where the 10 minutes of waiting comes in. I'm finally able to make contact at around minute 12 of this operation. I really don't know what to say about this mission though. The strategy truly is to just wait. I waited until the target eventually broke into some tree cover. From here, I unintentionally lure the anchor guard away from the pack briefly by getting noticed as I was trying to reposition. After opening my iDroid and seeing how far I'd lured him from the group, an idea hatched. I decided that I was gonna get his attention once more, this time on purpose. I got in range again to knock my arm, and from here, I'm able to back off a little and get up to a crouched position to continue pulling him away from his post. After shaking him, I was then able to slowly approach the target while they were briefly stopped, and they do this fairly often, so it's easy enough to find an opportunity. Oh right, I forgot to mention, you simply cannot do this mission without the water gun, so I brought that in with me. And as far as I know, it's also not possible to do without holding up the bodyguard that's positioned right alongside the target, as he would be alerted otherwise. I think that's really all there was to it. Feel free to watch the episode in its entirety in the link below if you're looking to attempt this run yourself.
Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
Sometimes you try something so many times and end up, each time, getting the same results. Well, that's called insanity. But the thing about insanity is that sometimes it's right. I mean, look at Alex Jones. He's right more than he's wrong.
And he's not an evil guy.
Insanity. Alex Jones. What the hell does any of this have to do with this mission? Well, nothing really. I just like making fun of old Pappy Joe when I can. But seriously, this mission I'd done so many times the same way, over and over again, expecting this next one to be the one. Well, technically, I did add an extra step that eventually proved to be the key to solving this mission, but everything else was almost exactly the tactic I've been trying multiple times over. Starting off on D-Horse, I followed the helicopter above's pattern to remain out of sight, but still heading in the direction of my target. Just up the hill is where my target was set to meet a subordinate. Now, this dude would call off the meeting if he found anything even slightly suspicious, and I plan on using that to my advantage. Now, just attracting their attention and getting them to search for me wasn't enough to call off this meeting, but maybe something else could. After dismounting D-Horse and continuing on foot, I lurked along the top of a hill overlooking their convoy. After tagging all that I could see, I kept pushing in, accidentally sorta getting seen by one of the dudes in the group. I, of course, course corrected by pulling back a little more, then got back on track onto my pre-planned course. I was now positioned a bit downhill from them behind a rock, and after dropping to the ground, I crawled as close as I could to this group without being spotted. There was enough tall grass, trees, and rocks to obscure me enough to actually get pretty damn close. Now that I was here, I whipped out my iDroid and played the African lullaby in hopes that it would knock out my target. Well, it worked, but only on him and like one other guard. This was extremely alarming for the enemy, so much so that the meeting was now off. They began waking their men up and rallying into the jeeps, looking for a quick getaway. Well, I'm just gonna stay put until I can see an opening, if there even is one. It wasn't until most of the men were loaded up in the jeeps before I began moving again. I knew from tirelessly repeating this mission that my target would always load up in the Jeep that was positioned in the back of the convoy, so if I could just make it there, I might be able to send him off without a trace. And by mere milliseconds, I'm able to barely secure a Fulton to the target's Jeep and complete the objective. After that, the coast was clear and I could head out of the mission zone atop D-Horse with 0 further encounters.
Exfiltrated.
All right, you're out of the hot zone. No enemy forces in pursuit. Mission complete. Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss.
Well, there it is. That concludes the majority of this challenge. I still have one last mission to complete, but like I said in part 1, that one gets its own video. I'm sure there will be some uproar in the comments about how I didn't do X mission or whatever, but if you think that you can do those missions like Skullface and back up back down under this rule set, you're out of your damn mind. But hell, feel free to prove me wrong. I had a lot of fun and frustrating moments while compiling this challenge, but ultimately, I felt this challenge hit the core definition of what a challenge is. I think this is by far the hardest challenge on my channel to date, and I look forward to finding the next one to take its place. Anyway, I appreciate you all for being here, and I'll see y'all in the next one.